It's startling sometimes when I realize that there is so much misinformation out there, and just a need for just more information and better information and education, both in the halachic realm, both in the women's health realm. I guess I've been spoiled over the past few years to be involved with Nishmat and exposed to all of their resources. And so I feel like myself, but also within like our Yoetzet community, we have such a robust understanding of the way that halacha and women's healthcare go together. And I feel bad when I see like a woman, she just needed to like just be more aware of like the halachic ramifications of this situation, or she really just needed to know the side effects and all of the potential things that can happen when a woman gets an IUD, things like that. And I'm startled by just how little or maybe just the opportunity isn't there.
This is Women's Gallery, the podcast where we showcase women defining Jewish leadership today. My name is Joanne Greenaway, and each episode I interview one incredible female leader making a mark in her own way on the Jewish community. We explore different models of leadership in the context of schools, shuls, universities, batei din, and much more. And today I'm very excited to have with me a friend, Rabbanit Yaffa Setton, who I've got to know through the International Halacha Scholars Program. She is multi-talented. She has what I think is a very unique perspective from her work with a lot of different, very interconnected hats. Yaffa serves the Syrian Sephardic communities of Brooklyn, New York and Deal, New Jersey as a Yoetzet Halacha, as a rebbetzen in a shul, and also a community educator. And on top of that, she's also a Judaic studies teacher by day at the yeshiva of Flatbush High School in Brooklyn. She was recently selected to join the inaugural cohort of Ematai's Advanced Torah Study Program in End-of-Life Care, which is really a flagship and very exciting new program comprised of a cohort of healthcare professionals, educators, community leaders, representing a comprehensive range of expertise, covering all sorts of topics such as halachic approaches to life-saving treatments, the permissibility of withholding care for the terminally ill, advanced healthcare directives, pain management, and organ donation protocols. And I'm really excited to get to discuss some of those topics with Yaffa. Yaffa also holds a master's degree in speech-language pathology. She's a certified lactation consultant. And just in her spare time, she looks after 5 children. And she's married to Rabbi Albert Setton. So Yaffa, Rabbanit Yaffa, it's really a delight to have you on Women's Gallery.
It's really a pleasure to be here, Joe. Thank you so much.
Yaffa, let's go straight in. I want to get a bit of a sense of your week, because I've talked about all the multiple hats that you hold. And clearly you're juggling a lot of different things, as we all are. But particularly you, I know you have your Shabbat role in Deal, you have your high school role, you have your family, you have your studies, you have lots of different things going on. So give us a bit of a sense about how your week looks and how you manage your different roles.
My week is a whirlwind. I'm in school for most of the day, so teaching. But in between classes, spare time, I find time to answer questions and plan things for after school in the community. On the weekends, in Deal, I teach kalot in the community, both in Deal and in Brooklyn. Definitely no work-life balance, but thank God, I'm privileged to be in a lot of very special spaces and doing a lot of different things. I'm up pretty early. Sometimes I wake up before my kids if I just need to get my thoughts together and just make a plan for the day. And then, of course, the morning rush is pushing everyone out the door and packing snacks. And then it all starts all over again when the school day ends at 4:30 and everybody walks in. And after dinner and bath and homework and all of that is done and settled. So I'm typically teaching at night or preparing at night or answering questions or learning, preparing for shiurim.
I'm tired hearing this, and I hope that you do get some sleep and that you have a self-care ritual, which we should probably talk about next time, because it does sound crazy. You've done a lot of different learning programs, and I'd like to know, having personally graduated from a number of different programs and most recently the International Halacha Scholars Program that you're finishing up, to me it's really fascinating that these programs are coming on the scene and they're offering different things and they're enabling women to get more and more skills and to diversify their repertoires. And you're really taking advantage of that. But I wonder from you how those decisions have been made in terms of adding different types of programs and how intentional you've been about the areas that you've got into, whether your strategy is really just to expand your learning or whether you've planned, as these have come online, to take on different kinds of areas of halacha.
I agree with you. It's so special now that there are so many different types of programs. And part of what I enjoy about learning in all of these different spaces is just meeting all the different types of women who are also taking advantage of these programs. And some of them are taking advantage of them on a more professional level, some on a personal level, and to just create this community of learning and of Torah growth, whether it's for teaching, whether it's for just knowledge or growth of one's own, one's own spiritual and Torah knowledge journey, has been really, really very special to me. In terms of halacha programs, I never thought that I would be learning in advanced halacha. I always say that Tanakh is my first love. I think I said that on my interview when I was being interviewed for Nishmat's Yoetzet Halacha program. I don't think it went over so well. To which they responded.
They didn't say you're on the wrong program.
Yeah, they said, we don't really learn Tanakh in this program. I said, no, I know. But I will always maintain that Tanakh is my first love. But as I became more involved in the community, I was teaching kalot when I entered the Yoetzet program for a number of years. And it was really something that I loved. But at a certain point in time, I felt like I really needed more. I felt like the questions were more complex. They were multifaceted. It wasn't just a halacha question. It was an emotional question. It was just navigating different pieces. And I felt I really needed more learning, more background in order to help support these women. And so I started the Yoetzet Halacha program and I loved it. It was definitely something different than what I had done either in my spare time or what I would naturally gravitate towards. Probably the last time that I have learned halacha in a serious way before Nishmat was my year in Israel in Migdalos. So it was definitely something different, but something that I was open to and excited to. And I really loved it. The concept of Torah is niknet beyisurin certainly became very real to me during my time at the program, that Torah is acquired through some hardship. I certainly related to that. And once I finished the Yoetzet Halacha program, they were offering a specialty, a concentration in fertility counseling and milavot poriyut. So I said, well, if I'm already being a Yoetzet, I might as well do this specialty in fertility counseling. I remember Rabbanit Yaffa talking about it in the beginning of my program, and right away I said, I got to do that. And so I continued that after I finished Nishmat. And the Halacha Scholars Program came up right after that. It was a new, I hadn't even known about it when they rolled it out for the first cohort, but for the second cohort, I had seen a flyer and a friend had told me about it, and I wanted to continue my learning, my halachic learning, both for myself, but also, again, for my community. Women and people have been turning to rebbetzens for so many years for so many different types of questions. And I said to myself, well, if they're going to ask me a Shabbat question or a kashrut question, I might as well actually know what I'm talking about when I answer it. And of course, if I didn't know, I would make sure to look it up or find out or ask or refer. But I felt that I was given this opportunity to learn. So why not? And so I chose to join the Halacha Scholars Program, which, as you know, has been so special in terms of the learning and in terms of just the network of women that we've been together with. And Ematai, also, when I saw the opportunity for the Ematai program, I immediately thought this is something that I would just love to do, to learn more about, primarily to also support people in my community through difficult cases, but also just for my own learning. And it's been such a special journey that we've been on through Ematai.
Well, let's come back to that soon because I'd love to hear more about it. And I'm wondering whether you, although you've broadened out with the different areas of halacha, whether your love is really the areas that are affecting women in terms of healthcare, because that's something where there is more of an impetus for women to consult women in the same way as the Yoetzet deals with Torah HaMishpacha when it's end of life and there are sensitive personal issues, which I found from being able to advise women around Avelut, which we learned on the International Halacha Scholars Program. I felt like that's a specific issue where, because it's so personal and intimate, that people really do find it easier to consult a woman.
Yes. So I think definitely the area of women's and women's health has been an area that I think drew me in, and just woman to woman being able to support women has been an interest of mine. But the more that I speak to people and the more that I get to know people and the more that I have relationships with people and really feel like I'm almost like going through life with them, it spills over into other areas. So a woman who I'm navigating, we're navigating a Torah HaMishpacha question, and she's like, actually, I accidentally just now, because I was so distracted, mixed my, meat pot in my meat dish that I was making with the dairy spoon. And we'll laugh about it because as moms, we have 10 different things on our heads. And so I think that those interactions just around life and just juggling a lot of things and being a mom and working and also keeping halacha, I think has been a space that I'm really happy to be in. And so it definitely has spilled over outside of just like women's and women's health, but more of just like, what is the Jewish experience of women, bigadol, and in general?
Right. I think that's so well put, because everything's ultimately linked through this Jewish experience, and it's all part of Jewish life. And by developing the relationships, then you're the person that can help them.
Okay.
When it comes to the programs, I also really liked what you said about how much you benefit, because I certainly feel like, having been part of these programs, one of the main things that you actually gain is the relationships with the women, the experience of getting to know women in their communities around the world. And then you find out about different developments, and there's this incredibly rich cross-fertilization, right, amongst this community of women learners who can pick things up from each other. I wonder whether you found from the different programs, though, that now you've had the benefit of studying through a number of different institutions, if you could characterize their differences in approach, if that's something that you pick up.
Yeah, I think so. I for sure, for Nishmat, the approach is guiding with navigating Torah Mishpacha. I could also say that the program is intense. It took over my life for 2.5 years. And they really do this so well, where they really equip us with the tools, with the knowledge, with all of the supplementary information. They really, really do an excellent job in terms of training and equipping us to go out and to support women. And when we need support, I have to say that I have found the Nishmat network so amazing. And I'm blessed to have that entire network of Rabbanim, of poskim, of the sisterhood that is the Yoetzet Halacha, that I think has been, around Torah Mishpacha, has been something very incredible and unique. And I think that they craft their program around this. In terms of the International Halacha Scholars Program, because it's a part-time program, they do recognize that women in the program have a lot going on and they have their own lives. And so it's very much geared towards women who are looking to learn and to grow and to create also this like learning community, but not in a way that's going to take over your life in a very, very intense way, in a way that you can manage to do that with all of the other things that are happening, and in a way that also exposes you to all different types of areas of halacha. And Ematai is, even though we definitely have halacha shirim, it's a lot more ethics based and more philosophical, which is different than Nishmat and halacha scholars, because you're grappling with more ethical situations and ethical questions, but also tied into the halachic realm, which is fascinating.
It sounds like an amazing combination that you've put all of them together, because they complement each other so well. wanted to draw your attention to a brand new course that LSJS is running called Women and Mitzvot. What does an observant life look like for spiritually aspirational women? It's covering the framework of halacha. Does exempt mean you can or can't, should or shouldn't, and various different topics that pertain specifically to women, such as head covering, candles, status in marriage and divorce, a wide-ranging course taught by 3 expert teachers in Jewish law, myself, Dr. Lindsay Simmons, and Rabbanit Rachel Weber-Leshaw. I really hope that you can join. It's available to book now. There's a link in the show notes, and it's also at lsjs.ac.uk/WM. And now back to the episode. So let's start with the Yoetzet Halacha. Not long ago, a couple of months ago, I interviewed Rabbanit Hannah Henkin on this podcast, which was really an honor. And I really got to understand a little bit about the formation of the program and her leadership, how she's really been able to transform the community through the Yoetzot. And I think I've had quite a number of Yoetzot on this podcast, but I've never really got into the meat of the actual questions that you're asked and the scenarios you're dealing with. And I had a look at your Dear Yoetzet podcast, and one thing that really struck me was the episode that you recorded about mikvah on Seder night, when you have this conundrum that a woman is due to go to the mikvah on Seder. And it really struck me because it brought back a memory of mine, and this is a personal disclosure, but the very first time I went to the mikvah after I got married was, would you believe it, on Seder night. And I was in the Dead Sea in Ein Bokek with my husband's huge, wonderful, extended Sephardi Persian family. And my husband and I went quite far down the coast to get to a mikvah in a hotel, came back, and I was with my wet hair, and I had to walk into this huge room with lots of different families celebrating Leila Seder and make excuses to the family. And I find it amusing to talk about it now, but it was actually quite traumatic. And it was not an ideal way to start that whole mikvah practice within marriage. And I really wish I'd had somebody to go to and ask the question and think about the options that I really didn't have at the time. So I don't know how typical that question is. I hope it's not too regular. But what are some of the situations, maybe amusing, but maybe also some of the kind of fraught situations that you deal with that you've had to address from women who come to you?
It's that situations like this certainly come up. I will say certainly around Chagim. I will say, in the summertime, a lot of the Syrian community, they come to Deal for the summer. So it's not just the Deal community that's there, but it's also a lot of the Brooklyn community. And I probably have some version of your Seder night question every Friday night because it's multiple families living together. And so navigating those questions, what's amusing for one woman or what one woman can laugh off in our conversation and trying to navigate things is another woman's real tipping point and really, really stressful. So even though sometimes we're dealing with the same question, the way that it is received or the way that it's handled sometimes comes with all different types of emotions. And so that's something that, thank God, Nishmat really trained us to handle and to navigate. And so I certainly have those types of questions that come up a lot. It's startling sometimes when I realize that there is so much misinformation out there and just a need for just more information and better information and education, both in the halachic realm, both in the women's health realm. I guess I've been spoiled over the past few years to be involved with Nishmat and exposed to all of their resources. And so I feel like myself, but also within our Yoetzet community, we have such a robust understanding of the way that halacha and women's health care go together. And I feel bad when I see a woman, she just needed to just be more aware of the halachic ramifications of this situation, or she really just needed to know the side effects and all of the potential things that can happen when a woman gets an IUD, things like that. And I'm sometimes startled by just how little or maybe just the opportunity isn't there for women to just.
That's also about encouraging people to ask and making them, have somebody that they can approach so that these questions do actually get asked rather than ignored until it's too late.
Yes. Yes, and sometimes people just, it's also a matter of they know where to go and who to ask, and so sometimes finally when they come to me either through a friend of a friend of a friend, so finally we can sort of sit down and unpack everything, and I hope that that's helpful, and it's certainly something that comes up a lot. I think sometimes what's amusing is, and I say this because not that I'm amused, but it's funny when women tell me they're navigating a difficult situation, and because it's really impacting shalom bayit, as if like I don't know that. And I always say, like, listen, we're on the same team. My goal is to support your
Right,
shalom
because
bayit.
they think that will help you.
Yeah.
Because they think that will help you give them a lenient answer.
Like to increase like the urgency of the question. I'm always like, I got you. I'm with you. I'm supporting your shalom
We're on the
bayit.
same team.
We're on the same team. And so I think, and I'm sometimes I'm sad that people don't know that. I want to tell them for sure shalom bayit is my priority. And so I do try to make a point when I'm teaching my kalot or just answering a question. The goal is to support your shalom bayit in a halachic way,
i.e. to help you to have a healthy relationship, and then to enable the couple to be together when they otherwise might not be able to be.
Yeah, and we're balancing both of those priorities, and together we will do the best that we can and work the hardest to make sure that we find a solution for you that prioritizes those two things in the best and healthiest way.
Yeah, it sounds like quite a lot of the questions are similar and like recurring questions, particularly within your community, like you've mentioned, but that your skill is really trying to understand the person and how these kind of things land with different types of personality types, and really the more therapeutic, holistic approach, which really comes with any kind of training in this area. It's so important.
Yeah, I would say with women's issues, I think that's that's everything. The same question could be asked, and it could be a relatively simple question, but just the circumstances under which the question is being asked really makes all the difference. And so, what's a simple Tevilah on Friday night question for one person can be, so complicated for a woman who's just juggling many, many things and can't possibly figure out how to navigate that Friday night Tevilah situation when there are other factors happening. And so,
but are there examples of questions where you really do have to go away and do serious research that are much more complex, and you can't just answer them al regel echad?
Sure.
How does that work?
Sure. So those really are the questions that are probably outside of my scope, in terms of maybe they need really a psak, maybe they need to be referred to a psak, or sometimes it's just a question that it's not like in the regular list of questions, and it's a little bit more like, I haven't been asked that in a while. Let me go back and look it up, and I'll open up Shulchan Aruch, or really probably Taharat Habayit, which is Shlomo Ovadiah's 3-volume set on Taharat Mishpacha.
A lot of Taharat Mishpacha is quite specific, whether you're Sephardi or Ashkenazi. So it's natural that you're serving the Syrian Sephardic community. You'd be looking much more into Rav Ovadia Yosef and his work, which is quite different to the kind of research that an Ashkenazi Yoetzet would be doing.
Yes, I was very vocal about that during my time at the program, and
especially because it's more lenient, so you should definitely go with it.
And yeah, so a lot of sometimes if I need to go look that up, then I will. Other times, if it's a loaded question where the answer isn't so clear cut, if it's a let's say a fertility question, or a question about a potential termination of pregnancy, those are I have to get all of the information in terms of what's going on with the woman. I have to get the information in terms of what she was told by her doctors, and prognosis and things like that, and that requires research. And then I would turn to a psak, either hers or one of my own, to navigate that, and those questions do take time.
Yeah, I know it's a complex dividing line between giving guidance and giving psak, and that's something that we have to navigate. And I'm sure that a woman in that situation that you've just mentioned would expect you to go to a rav, and that's totally responsible and really important that you don't carry that on your own shoulders, and that you really fully investigate it with other people who've naturally been dealing with these issues for much longer. But I also see that it's not straightforward, because sometimes a woman comes to you because she wants you, or because she's dealing with a personal issue and wants a Rabbanit or a Yoetzet to deal with it, as opposed to a Rav. And I don't know how you manage that.
It's interesting. I agree with you when you say that there's a fine line between guidance and psak, but then there also is a difference, because as the Yoetzet, we don't give Yoetzot, don't give psak halacha. We answer questions that are halacha psuka. So it's written in Shulchan Aruch, it's written in Tarat Habayit, or any of your other, written halacha books, and really the majority of questions are that. But
you're still applying it to the individual woman.
Yes, 100%,
in her context,
100%, and giving her the, guidance and navigating all those things. But a lot of times it's those halacha pesuka questions. So the same way that those apply in Tarat Mishpacha, it's like the same thing of I use my dairy spoon in my meat pot. Just how upset are we about that? But in terms of psak, so if a woman will say,
I am conscious we're using a lot of Hebrew words that I'm sure many people will understand, but sometimes when I listen back and realize that we think we're speaking English and actually we haven't been speaking English. So we should be conscious of the words we're using.
Yes, totally. So in terms of psak, which is a halachic ruling that isn't necessarily written in the halacha books, it needs to be more tailored to the individual because that individual case isn't discussed. So if a woman tells me that she's hesitant to speak to a Rav or doesn't know which Rav to speak to, I will surely offer support. I will offer to speak to the Rav on her behalf, although many times I encourage women to advocate for themselves and speak for themselves, or I offer we can speak all together, the three of us, and I will try to support the woman in whatever way she needs to be supported and whatever she needs. But I will emphasize that the same way that if there was a medical issue, you wouldn't necessarily only go to somebody that you like. You would also go to the person that has the most expertise because they could probably help you. And so I would say I is going to be the one to tell you that. And like I said, I can summarize, I can support, I can be here. But in the same way that you would trust your doctor to give you a medical decision, we're going to speak to a psak who has yirat shamayim, who is God-fearing, but also is ohevet haberiyot and respects people and loves people. And it's really through those qualities and through the expertise that they're going to be able to give you an answer. And again, I'll be here to help navigate, and whatever the answer is, we can navigate it together.
Yeah. It makes sense to me as a kind of a triage process. And actually, the way you describe it for the first time has resonated with me as an English person, because here in the UK, we have a system of general practitioners who then refer on to specialists. And so you don't go straight to a specialist, you go to somebody who has a wide range of expertise, but then they sometimes have to refer on. So I understand.
Sometimes it'll be a question of a woman just having her own rabbi, but she's just not sure how to address him. And so I can facilitate that. And sometimes she doesn't know who to ask. And so thank God I have the Nishmat network and other networks. And so we're able to find her the right person.
Right. But if you're, as I understand it, the only Yoetzet in the Flatbush community and the Deal community, then I think you have a hugely important role and responsibility.
Yeah, so there is another one. I do have a partner in crime, Zahava, my dear friend Zahava Harari. So it's really the two of us here in the community, and we definitely we talk about this a lot in terms of referrals and who to talk to and who to call for what.
Okay, let's turn to Ematai specifically, because I'd really like to cover that, as it's something brand new on the scene that to me it seems like it's a really crucial new space for women's leadership. And we've talked a little bit about what it offers and what attracted you to it in terms of its broader outlook when it comes to teaching about ethics and understanding the context. And that's, I think, really groundbreaking. I'm really happy to hear. How do you think that you'll be able to use that in your community? And have you, as a cohort, been advised as to how to integrate it into what you're doing and how to roll out that advice, how to set yourself up in terms of people who are able to get into this very niche but really critical area of life?
So I think in my community, as well as in any community, a lot of these issues Ematai specializes in are really, really complex. You're balancing halacha, you're balancing ethics, you're balancing people's values. And so even just creating awareness and a dialogue is huge. And I know that that is something that Ematai wants us to do. I think just from a practical perspective, also in terms of the material and the shiurim that I can teach. So I now have, Be'ezrat Hashem, God willing, I'll have this added topic and this added space that I could, add to my repertoire. And really a shiur or a class is a great way to bring people together, to educate people on a topic, and to get people to talk about it. You remember the first time I gave a class about putting on makeup on Shabbat, and I've probably given that class so many times since, because people started talking about it, and then I would get calls from, oh, I heard you have a class on makeup on Shabbat. Can I just ask you a question? And so once you just open that up, you just become the person who talks about it. And I don't really know about this, but I can refer you to Rav Brody from Ematai. And so I think just the teaching and the creating awareness and the dialogue, because I'm so close with the people in my community, sometimes I feel like, I teach them in high school and then I teach them as kalot and move along the lifespan sometimes with them. And so this felt like a natural sort of progression to the learning that I've done, and maybe in the way in which things will come up. Especially, Joe, you mentioned avelut and answering questions in avelut for women. And I used to never even try to answer questions in avelut. I never learned avelut, so what business do I have guiding women in avelut? And then once we did it in the Halacha Scholars Program, and then when women would ask me previously, before I learned it, I would say, this is not my topic, please, you can ask my husband, you can ask somebody else. But since I've tried and I have guided some women, and I do think that they've been appreciative to be able to just speak to women about their avelut experience. And I think that this really is very potentially, related field where people are dealing with complex ethical things. And because we value life so much, and we value our family members, and some of these questions are really not simple, as you mentioned in the beginning, of withholding treatment or healthcare directives, or how do we decide what types of life-saving treatments. These questions are not simple to deal with. And I also think that when people are in a situation where they are faced with such a question and they're kind of like, I don't know what to do, sometimes what's also behind that, I think, is like, what am I expected to do? What does God want me to do? What am I supposed to do here? And without having, I think, a space or a resource to navigate that.
A sounding board,
exactly. It's lonely to be in that place where you feel like there's this huge issue that you have to navigate. And Rav Brody and Rabbi Weiner have said this in the beginning, and it really resonated with me. And I think it's true not just for end of life, but I think it's true for fertility and for all areas of halacha. And that's, we have such a rich masoret, such a rich tradition of halachic literature, of writing, and it has a lot to say about these issues. And so when we're navigating through them, we don't need to feel so alone, because we have this rich tradition. So we can feel like, I am doing this in line with our traditions and our great sages. And I think that that's something that's comforting for people. I think it helps people feel like they are doing the right thing. And so if I can sort of help people along with that process and help them feel that, then how lucky am I to do that for people?
I'm remembering that when I worked in the London Bet Din, actually the Rosh Bet Din Dayan used to field a lot of questions around end of life, and people came to him around all sorts of organ donation questions and, life support questions. And I don't know how much community rabbis are dealing with day to day, but I think it sounds to me like your program will have a huge impact in terms of raising the profile of discussion around these issues and giving people somebody to talk to triage, and even to know that then they can refer what are the complex questions that then need to go to a Dayan or to Rav Yoni Rosenzweig or somebody who's been really deep into these questions. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this progresses in terms of its impact in the community.
The Big Questions of Jewish Belief podcast is back for a second season. I'm Rabbi Dr. Raphael Zarum, and in this new season, I talk to 4 brilliant minds and proud Jews about their personal beliefs. Anthony Julius speaks to the dead. Naomi Alderman loves a good argument. Anna Wagner sees religion in human rights. And Professor Stephen Frosch says God is not about what exists, but about what is real. Come grapple with the unknowable. Follow Big Questions of Jewish Belief, Season 2 by LSJS on all major podcast platforms.
I want to talk a little bit about your community, because I have to say that I love your community, and I have had the privilege of, through a friend of mine, getting to know particularly your school where you teach, and I've taught a couple of classes to some super duper brilliant girls in the Yeshiva of Flatbush. And I've been fascinated by it, partly, I suppose, because of my knowledge of the Persian community. And I see some similarities in terms of this real, like, close-knit family structure with a really shared sense of culture. But I think many people don't know that there's this incredibly strong Syrian community in Brooklyn. And from my research, I don't know if it doesn't seem to be that clear, but there are around 50,000 Syrian Jews in Brooklyn who came over in lots of different waves of emigration from Syria. And there was a very strong Syrian community since post-Spanish Inquisition, right? Yeah. And then over the 20th century, people came. There were pogroms in 1947 and onwards, and people came. And then in 1992, Assad allowed Jews, they were then allowed to leave legally, but on condition they wouldn't go to Israel. So even more so, they settled where you are. But I'm sure you can tell it better. And I'd love to hear from you about what to you is special about your community.
Oh, there are a lot of special things. Yeah. And like you said, there are people who came from Syria, from Egypt, from Lebanon, from all different places in the Middle East. Some have been since the early 1900s. So their families are super, super American. And I can tell you, my in-laws were born in Cairo. And so my husband is a first generation American. And so, we definitely, the community, the same way that, like you said, Joe, that sometimes people don't know that there's this whole, rich Syrian community in Brooklyn. And then also in Deal, the Deal community is growing rapidly. It's really, really beautiful to see. A lot of times.
That's your beach community, yes. Right?
So it's where a lot of the Brooklyn Syrians go in the summer, but there is a year-round community. We go to Deal every weekend because that's where my husband is a rabbi in one of the shuls there. And so, we're part of the year-round community as well. And in the same way that people don't know that there's the Syrian community, there's many Syrians that don't know much about other communities outside of Brooklyn. It's
a whole world.
There's a whole Jewish world out there.
But the Syrian community is also a whole Jewish world, it seems, from within.
It's a whole Jewish world in and of itself. There's a closeness. There is an intense commitment to tradition. The same way that you can walk in other communities, walk in somebody's house on Friday night and they're, maybe eating, chicken soup and kugel and chillin'. So you can, and it's the same, you can walk into a Syrian house on Friday night and probably people are pretty much eating a variation of the same thing, of the foods and the spices. And there's a lot of time spent on family gatherings and homemade meals and hosting. And there's a real sense of warmth and giving and chesed. And it's really beautiful. And I have to say that the close-knit nature of the community, I think, is what allows me to really form relationships with people that whether it's, my students that I teach, because I also know their moms and their sisters and their older sisters and their younger sisters, or congregants. I've had families where I think I taught for their wedding for every girl, every daughter and daughter-in-law in the family. And so it's nice because when she calls me and says, I have to go to the mikvah on Friday night, or I have to go on a seder night. And I'm going to my in-laws. So I know exactly who's there and I know exactly who's waiting. And that's been special to be able to really sort of go through life with these women. I think has been very, very special.
I imagine that you're successful. I can imagine that somebody who comes from the outside, say as a Yoetzet Halacha, would not have nearly the same amount of traction or ability to gain trust within the community, and that you're one of them and they understand you. And that's really part of the way of being a leader within your community. And you do it so beautifully. But I can see also the flip side, which I also experienced to some extent, which is that there aren't boundaries, right? You're always on. You can't separate your life from the hat that you have as a leader from the hat that you have as a mum and as a cousin of some of them. That can be challenging.
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot. Like I said, it's very little work-life balance. And so, but I do think that being in the space that I am, coming from my own community, hopefully really is something that adds and has the, and enables me to support the community in a way that I don't know that I would have been able to do had I not come from the community.
Did you have any particular role models, I suppose, from within the community that helped you to figure out how you want to be a leader there?
In high school and I was very much my own person. I always had a very strong sense of who I was and who I wanted to be. Certainly when I got to Israel, and I encourage all of my 12th grade students to try to take advantage if they're able to spend a year in Israel and just connect to the broader Jewish world. I think that was where really my eyes were open in terms of role models and in terms of just teachers and Torah personalities and in general personalities that I really looked up to. My time in Migdal Oz and then later on in my time in Nishmat and all of the programs that I've learned in. It's really been inspiring to me to learn from such knowledgeable and sensitive and committed to our nation, people who are committed to our nation, people who are committed to Hashem, people who are committed to Torah. It's been so inspiring to me, and it really fuels, I think, my own desire to sort of grow also in that space.
I'm sure many people will cite you as their role model because you've taught so many, like you say, so many different generations of women in the same family, and it's an amazing script to be able to do that. Given that you're an educator, I always like to ask those who are particularly Torah educators who come on the podcast to share some kind of Torah that you think feels relevant right now, whether it's to women or to leaders or to this moment in Jewish life. Is there any source or any message you want to leave us with?
So we were on the topic of role models. So really the women in Tanakh have always been also my role models. If I had to pinpoint, they're all, but if I had to pinpoint two, I would look to Sarah Imenu, who the Torah introduces to us as Yiska. And we know that Rashi, quoting the Midrash, gives us the reasons for why the Torah names her that initially. She is Hakol Sochim Beyofya, she's Socha Beruach HaKodesh, she's Lashon Nesichut, so she has insight and she has beauty and she has leadership. And she really uses those gifts and those natural talents that she has to teach people, to bring people closer to knowledge of Hashem, to increase, learning. And that really has been a role model for me and a tefillah for me, a prayer for me and for all of us, that we all lean into our talents in a way that we use them to just bring good into the world and to grow Torah into the world and to strengthen ourselves as a people and as a nation and as a country. And the other, I would say, is Miriam. And there's a piece from the Ish Kodesh, the Rebbe from Piaseczna, the Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto, that really I think about a lot when I think about Miriam. And now we're in the Parshiyot where we're talking about Miriam and her leadership. And what the Ish Kodesh points out is that Rashi makes a comment about how the deaths of Moshe and Aharon were different than that of Miriam. And he uses that to distinguish Miriam's leadership from Moshe and Aharon's leadership. And he says that Hashem chose Moshe and Aharon. They're very much chosen by Hashem to do a specific tafkid. Hashem knew what he was doing when he chose them. They did their jobs excellent, and also using their own natural talents, which they grew and developed to lead the people in a very, very meaningful way. But Miriam was not chosen by Hashem. Miriam took charge on her own, and she chose to be a leader, and she took that role on for herself. And she was really, in the way that she did that, she was so successful. And part of the leader that she was the fact that no one told her to do it. She just got up and saw a need and saw a space and changed, I want to say, like, the landscape of what her impact was on the people, meaning she just changed, the fact that now she was leading the women, whereas if she never did that, then she wouldn't have been this central figure in the desert, where the Jewish people are not just being led by Moshe and Aharon, but they're being led by Moshe, Aharon, and Miriam. And a testament to that, or a way in which I think we see this further, is that Moshe and Aharon have successors. When their time is up, they have people that are going to take them over. Miriam doesn't have a successor, because naming a successor would defeat the purpose of how she leads. And so I think about this a lot, and my hope, like I said, and my tefillah is that we follow Moshe and Aharon, but also, be inspired by Miriam in just acting and doing things because we know that we should. And we know that we should seize the opportunity to make changes in terms of us as individuals, in terms of us as a nation, in terms of Eretz Yisrael. And God willing, we should be zocheh. It's a good thing.
I love that. Both of those examples are so poignant and have given me so much food for thought. And particularly this whole notion of stepping up and connecting that with Miriam. It will help me think as we carry on with these parashiot. I wonder just finally whether the women, because you teach in high school, like, do you have hope in those girls? Like, do you see a future for them in terms of them taking on the mantle in that way?
I do. And I am always inspired by when they come to me with something that they're thinking about that's like out of the scope of the topic that we're learning. It's like they want to explore this idea in Torah and that idea in Torah. And to me, really, that is truly inspiring. And the fact that what is available to me now wasn't necessarily available to me when I was in high school. And so I'm excited to see what will be available to them and how they will take advantage of this, changing landscape of women and learning. And I guess I'll finish with quoting what I heard Rav Oren Duvdevani say recently. I was in a shiur with him, and he said that, women learning to him means the fulfillment of Yeshayahu's prophecy of Umal'ah ha'aretz de'at Hashem, that the world will be filled with knowledge of God and the wisdom of God. And so, just the more connection to Torah and Avodat Hashem and, service of God and connecting to Am Yisrael, I hope that they will take those opportunities and continue to fulfill the prophecy of Yeshayahu that way.
Amen. What a place to end. Thank you so much. I feel totally uplifted, and I've really, really enjoyed having you on Women's Gallery and being able to spend time talking with you. Rabbanit Yaffa, thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for spending time with you.
And thank you to all our listeners. Please do share this podcast if you've enjoyed it. Share this episode and encourage your friends to follow Women's Gallery and give it a rate and a review, because that also really helps us grow and spread the word. And do look out for our programs with LSJS. We've just launched our next semester with a lot of different courses and tours and overseas tours and museum tours and in-depth learning opportunities, including women's in-depth learning. So have a look at our website, lsjs.ac.uk, and look forward to learning with you soon.